I just hit the record button and I'm going to talk about anger issues and anything else that seems to come up in this process. Welcome to episode 48.
Welcome to the show.
Well, welcome to the show. My name is Will Sinclair and I am your host for today. You're listening to The Real Truth About You, and this is where we try to help you discover the most amazing you from the inside out to change the inside so the outside changes all on its own. So one of the things I want to talk to you about today is anger issues. I had a lot of anger in my life, and I want to talk a little bit about that and how it might affect you if you have anger issues. And sometimes when you have anger issues, you're not listening to things that talk about anger issues, but maybe you had, or maybe you do have and you're aware of it, or maybe you know somebody else in your life who has big anger issues. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. I was pretty excited, actually. I went to a naturopath doctor for the first time last week, a week ago, and or a couple of weeks ago, probably by the time you hear this episode. And he's basically a medical doctor. He's a qualified medical doctor, but the only difference between him and your family doctor is that he uses natural medicine, so medicines from nature, rather than just going to the pharmacy and popping whatever drug. And not discrediting that, but there's something about nature and nature's ability to cure you and your body's ability to cure you. But that's not what this is about. That I sat down with them, and we sat down for basically a 2-hour consultation. He was just amazing. But during the process, and why it was probably 2 hours, was we ended up sharing so many common traits and passions and interests and hobbies and insights. And if you want to go back to episode 1 of this show, The Real Truth About You, which you can get at therealtruthaboutyou.com, and you can download it or go to iTunes or whatever. And anyway, back then I talked about being what's called a multi-potentialite. And if you're not sure what that is, you can go to a website. It's called puttylike.com, puttylike.com, and it's Emily, I think it's Emily Wapnick, or I can't remember her last name, but anyway, she gave a TED talk, and it was about people who are into multiple things all at the same time. And diversity, I've always said that diversity is my only consistency in life. And so, like, I'm really into this podcasting, and so I'll get really into it and learn all I can about it. And then my passion will start to shift into something else. I'm also a writer, so I'll delve into that, learn as much as I can about it, invest money in it, and do that, and then move on to something else. And photography, I'm into that. I'm into filmmaking. I'm into all kinds of creative things, I guess, is my main thing. But I never seem to stick to one thing. I remember going to my father-in-law's, and I talked about this back in episode 1, where I would go to my father-in-law's house for supper every week, and it was almost like I was going through the alphabet of careers. You know, one day I'm going to be a police, and I was going to apply to the police, and I bought books on how to apply to become a police officer, and then the next thing I really want to be a pilot. That's so interesting. That's so cool. And he said to me, can't you just pick one thing and stick with it? And I really thought that was an issue. I thought, no, I can't. I don't think I can. And I tried really hard and I wished, but wishing just didn't do it. And I just couldn't stick to one thing. And I found out after listening to this TED talk with Emily, and she started talking about what's called multi-potentialite, and that's those people, you might be one of them, or you maybe know someone, and you refer to them as like, oh my gosh, this person, they start all kinds of things, and they never finish. So frustrating. They start a project and they never finish it, never see it to completion. And somebody else has to come in, or they start a group, and somebody else has to come in and keep it going. Well, that's me. And if you listen to this Emily talk on this TED Talks, if you've never listened to TED Talks, go to tedtalks.com, I think it is. And amazing talks by ordinary people. And anyway, she talks for about 12 minutes, and this 12 minutes almost transformed my life. And it was all about people who get interested and passionate about something and just learn all they can, even buying courses and books and delving into something and learning all they can about it. And then by the time they're ready to do something about it, they start that project and they start with all kinds of ideas. And then all of a sudden they're ready to move on. And they move on to something else and become deeply passionate about it. And not only are they learning stuff, but they love to teach other people about what they've learned. And there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. And then it's not that they never go back, or I never go back to my passions that I've learned about. I kind of intermingle between passions. I'm kind of like spaghetti on a plate and just move all over the place. And sometimes my passions intersect and sometimes they don't. And sometimes I really delve into one and get big into it, and then I move on and never go back to it. And often I go back to it. But one of the things she talks about is when you have all these passions, and it's where those passions intersect with each other. You know, if you take two circles, two rings, and you superimpose them on each other slightly so that there's another oval shape in the middle and the two rings on the outside, and where they join, that intersection of those two passions is where innovation happens. And that's basically my life. You know, I'm interested in teaching. I'm interested in learning about life. I'm interested in audio, and all those things kind of mix together. And I started podcasting. And so I started podcast about teaching you about life, or at least my life as I know it, and about the inner journey to inner peace, inner joy, that kind of stuff. And that's all evolved around audio and music, and you heard some music playing, and this is kind of like all mixed into podcasting, and you're sitting listening to this podcast, and I really appreciate you being here. But there's where that intersection happens, innovation happens, where all those passions intersect. And so I want to encourage you, if you're that kind of person, you're not alone. You are not alone. If you know that a person like that, who's just so passionate about so many different things, and they can't seem to stick to one thing. Like I found one of my strengths that I did an online test from a very reputable organization and found out I need to be involved in 17 different things, so to speak, all at the same time, and start lots of things and never accomplish them, because that's my strength. My strength is to be a startup person. I start things. I get things going. I get the airplane off the ground, fueled up. I get the airplane full of passengers, so to speak, and it's a metaphor. And then I get the plane off the ground, and I get it in the air. And that's my gift. I can get that thing going where other people might not. But to keep it in the air and keep flying it and sit in that seat and press the buttons and calculate the course and all that, and destinations and all the variables it takes for that flying, that airplane, that's just not me. I'll be so bored. I'll be thinking about other things. And so I need somebody else to step in who loves doing that but hates starting things. I need a person who's really good at keeping that airplane going, dotting the T's, and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and doing all that kind of things, and the researches. And, so I'm really good at getting things going, and that's my gift. Keeping it going is another thing, and that's why I have a hard time with Facebook, and I'm not that kind of social person to just keep things going. I find it difficult with emailing campaigns where you're constantly staying in touch with people. This podcast is probably one of the longest things, non-contact, in the sense of I'm not standing right in front of you, so to speak, physically, as I do, say, when I public speak or when I'm involved in other groups. But this podcast is probably one of the longest things I've kept going, other than having a video production studio and stuff like that. But this podcast, this is episode 48. I remember episode 1 talking and saying, well, let's see how far this goes. If you listen to episode 1, I think it's 9 minutes long or something like that. And I said, I don't know how long this is going to last. Maybe it's going to last this episode, or maybe 5 episodes or 2 episodes. Well, here we are, episode 48 of The Real Truth About You. And so, yeah, I just want to talk about that because this naturopath doctor, which I diverged down a rabbit hole here, he's into a lot of the same things. He's a doctor. He's a medical doctor, right, that uses nature for healing. And he's also into filmmaking and video production, and he's also he's a very profound songwriter and musician. And if you go to broadjam.com, I'm not going to give his name out right now, but actually, well, yeah, Doug Amell. I think it's Amell or Amell, A-M-E-L-L, Doug Amell, A-M-E-L-L. Look him up on broadjam.com. It's free to sign up as a fan. And he's a musician on there and just got amazing songs. And some of his songs are like James Bond themes. And he produces some of his stuff, and he gets other people to produce some of his stuff too. And you can hear all those versions on broadjam.com, BROADJAM.com, broadjam.com. Check him out. And he's also an author. He loves to write, and he's into so many things. So I think we're going to connect a little bit. And anyway, just loved being with him. So that took up half the appointment. My daughter was actually there trying to take notes for this appointment, and because he's very thorough in his diagnosis and things, and she's just sitting there like, oh my gosh, So anyway, that's it, multi-potentialite, and you can check out puttylike.com if you want to see Emily's TED Talk on there about that, if that interests you. Anger. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about anger. Can we do some, let me see, transition music? Yeah, let me see. There we go. Oh, yeah, we got some transition music going on here. Hope this is not making you angry waiting for the anger talk. Okay, I used to have a lot of anger in my life, and I think it stemmed a little bit from, they say anger stems from fear, guilt stems from fear, a lot of it stems from fear. I had an abusive upbringing. I'm not saying there wasn't love in my family. I always say this is, my family was a place where love and abuse coexisted, and I've since settled a lot with my mother, who's now deceased and passed on. And I had an amazing encounter with her even after she died. And for some of you, that might sound weird, but to me, it was pretty natural. It was just amazing, and an amazing forgiveness and things like that. And we had talked a little bit before she died, like quite a while before that. But she was my main abuser, and but loved me too. Like, and she had a wild childhood herself, right? And so she brought all that into her marriage and into her parenting, and saw life the way she saw it, right? And dealt with things the best she could. And now here I am. But I grew up with a lot of anger issues, and I didn't know I had this anger, and I didn't really know why I had the anger. I would wake up and most of it came out when I got married, and I was never physically harmful to my kids or my wife, but I was definitely emotionally abusive. I played a lot of mind games, and it was almost like I had to pay to be loved in my family when I was a kid, I'm talking about. And so I learned how to make people pay to get my love. And I would play those kind of mind games, and I would make up all kinds of stories and lies just to, manipulate my wife. And I had a lot of this anger that I would get a rage on so fast. I would get so angry, so bitter, so fast. And I would actually punch a hole in a wall. I remember doing that in one of the places I was in. And I had a desk drawer. I remember I just slamming it until it just broke to pieces. I would break things, and I would just get so angry, so inside. I would get so mad and so angry. and it would come out in physical ways like that. And like I said, I never physically hurt my kids or my wife, but I know that my anger played a part in their eventually going for help or whatever, that kind of thing. And I was happy when they did, because by that time I was also going for help. And but the breaking point for me was when we were in Ontario, Canada, and my mother was alive, and something happened and the kids were little. And anyway, it was like a can of worms just came up, and my wife said, that's not normal. What happened there is not normal life. I mean, however you can define normal, but he said, that's not normal life. And something inside of me cracked. And that was the start of my healing journey. And it wasn't like the anger just didn't end like that. I would still wake up, and I have a Christian background. That's my upbringing. And I would wake up on a Saturday morning and I would curse and I would swear at God. And I figured, well, he's got big shoulders, he can take it, kind of thing. And I would curse and I would swear at God. And it really helped in a sense, because then I wasn't taking it out on my kids and that. And I also went for counseling, and they gave me some techniques. But it wasn't until I started this meditation journey 4 years ago. This is 2017 now, that March 2017. And my meditation journey started in 2013. And I ended up joining a meditation group. And I've talked about this lots already in other podcasts, but never hurts to talk about it, or repeat something that's really good. But it wasn't until I took this journey inside, and I found that anger, there's something about anger, right? It is a fear, right? It's a fear of not being loved or not being given attention or dying to yourself. It's fears of different things, right? But I discovered that you can either live in your anger and be totally unconscious that you're angry, or you can live on a level of consciousness where you realize you're angry. And when you're unconscious about the whole thing, you just get angry. You don't realize it, and all of a sudden somebody does something or something happens, whatever it is. It could be anything. It could be like a pencil breaking or anything, and you just get so irritated, so mad, and every so often I still get like that inside, and it's still things that have to be dealt with, and still, but the difference is the awareness. But anyway, something happens or somebody says something and you just get angry, and then you try to bring everybody else into that anger so that they empathize with you. They appreciate that anger and why you're angry and justify it. Your friends tell you, yeah, you're right to be angry. I'd be kind of mad and pissed off too, so to speak. I'm sorry for the language. Yeah, well, whatever. But and you surround yourself with people who will support that anger, right? And justify that anger, so you can keep feeling that anger because you feel good in that shit pile almost. Right, you've become so comfortable in that frame of mind and that type of lifestyle that you're just comfortable in it, right? And you don't even realize you're in it. It's like that thing about I was going to say an example, but it's not a very good one. But anyway, you don't realize you're living in that anger, and you just get angry. And you want something else to appease you. You want your spouse, your partner to say sorry, or that person to come up and stop doing that. And you want everything else around you to change so that you don't feel that anger. But in reality, it's got nothing to do with them. It's got nothing to do with your externals. It's got everything to do with what's going on inside of you. And I remember a counselor telling me it's like an iceberg, and I've mentioned this before too. But it's like an iceberg. When you look at an iceberg in the ocean, whatever you see on top is only a small representation of what the iceberg is. The reason that piece is on the top is because there's a huge, big block of ice underneath the ocean that's floating underneath, submerged. And I remember a counselor telling me that when you get angry at something, or when somebody says something or whatever, what it's doing is it's like the iceberg at the top and the ocean at the top is your present. And the iceberg underneath that's submerged under the water is your past. And the past is gone, right? There's no such thing as past. Well, the past is gone. There's no such thing as a future because it doesn't exist. There's only the present moment right now. But the memories from the past, when something triggers your anger, he says it's like they've niggled something down in your past and they've drilled a hole into the iceberg in the past and something's come up to the surface and popped. And that whatever that is, whether you know what that memory is or not, it's triggering that anger. And it's your body telling you there's something that you have not dealt with. When that pops up and that anger comes up, or the guilt, it could be anything actually. It could be fear comes up or anxiety about the future. Is usually that's your body telling you something that you haven't dealt with in your inner self and in your past. And that's coming up as this anger, this fueled anger. And the difference between being conscious and unconscious is your awareness of that anger. And if you can try this exercise. I want you to imagine a red dot. Okay, so but if you close your eyes and you imagine, it could be any color dot you want, yellow dot, orange dot. So imagine black, and in the center, there's this dot, whatever color it is. Now I want you to focus on that dot, and I want you to keep your mind on that dot. And I want you to be conscious of your breathing, that you're breathing in through your nose and out through your nose or out through your mouth or whatever. And just be conscious and try and keep your mind focused on that dot, thinking about the dot, looking at the curve of the dot, the roundness, the color, is it bright yellow, what is it, right? And I just want you to focus on that dot and within that blackness, a small dot. It can be any size dot you want, but kind of small in the center. And I just want you to focus on that dot. And then when your mind wanders away, because it will, and then all of a sudden you realize you're not thinking about the dot anymore, I want you to come back and think about the dot. So think back about the dot. And as your mind wanders into another thought, and you realize that you're off somewhere else and you're not thinking about the dot, come back to the dot. Think about the dot. Now, the next time your mind starts to wander, look at what you were thinking about, right? So look at that thought and say, oh, that's what I was thinking about. And then come back to the dot. And then keep repeating that exercise over for as long as you can, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes, a minute, until you get to the point where you're becoming more aware of the fact that you're not thinking about the dot and you're off in another thought, which is okay. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, right? But what you've done is as soon as you start to realize and become aware of the fact that you're not thinking about this dot, you've moved to a whole new level of consciousness, because now you've become the silent observer of your mind. So you can tell when you're thinking a thought. You've actually become aware that you're thinking a thought. That's a process of becoming self-aware, of becoming aware, becoming awakened. If you hear that, becoming awakened. Now, you take that, right? If you practice that, the next time you get angry, become that silent observer of your life, right? And as soon as you might live in the anger for a little while, you get mad, and it depends on the kind of rage that you get or what you get. Look at that anger and say to yourself, I'm angry. And that's it. Just become aware that you're angry. The next time you become angry, I'm not saying you have to try to figure out why. Don't try to figure out why you're angry. Don't try to analyze anything. Just become aware of the fact that you're angry. When you can do that, you've moved to that level of consciousness where you're no longer unconscious. That's what we call about being conscious of something. Consciousness. Sometimes they're words that we get scared of because we think they're kind of voodoo words. But this is the level of consciousness we're talking about. You've moved to this new level. So the more that you can do that, the more your anger is going to slowly dissipate in your life. Because you become that silent observer of that anger. Now you've taken note of the fact that your body is telling you something, that something is not quite right. Because externals should not make you angry, right? They might trigger something in you, but you get to a point where you become so aware of your anger and so aware of things that an inner peace, it's like you've already got everything in you. I always say this, right? For those who believe in God, I really believe that God is already within you. We talk about it all the time, but we don't always realize it and live it. But God is already within you. And if God is within you, everything that's perfect is already in you. You already have that perfection, but we've covered it up in our lives. We've covered it up with stuff. It's like you take a light bulb and you start covering it up. Pretty soon you won't see that light bulb very well. There might be cracks and things that light shines through, right? But you've covered that up. So it's this process of uncovering and becoming more awakened. The more light that shines through you, the more awakened you become, the more peaceful you become. So when you start to recognize this anger, you become awakened. That's more light that starts to take place. Because anything that's subjected to the light, which is your awareness of your anger, has no choice but to transmute to light. So you walk into a darkened room, which is like what your anger could be. You walk into a darkened room and you turn the light on. Immediately, whatever is dark turns to light. And that's exactly what happens within you. Is as soon as you take those coverings off, more light comes through. Right? You allow more light to permeate you. You become more one with your Creator, with the world around you, with everything. You become more peaceful. And you become this observer of your mind, of your body, of your emotions. And so as soon as you start to observe and become aware of, they are no longer controlling you. Your anger is no longer controlling you. You might feel like every so often it is, but you are now becoming in control of your anger. And when I said don't try to analyze why you're angry, don't try to figure out or counsel, why am I so angry? What is it, my abusive childhood? Is it this? Is it? Don't even worry about that. Just become aware, because sooner or later, when it's your time, when you are ready to hear, it'll just come into your awareness as to why you're angry. Something will come into your awareness. I always wondered on my cancer journey why I survived and many of my friends died, and I thought it was survivor's guilt and things like that. But just going through the process of becoming aware of the fact that I'm thinking about this, but not trying to analyze it, I eventually came to a point where I felt like I didn't deserve to live. And I was aware of that. I became aware of that. Why was that? I don't know. Who cares? Just keep going. If you're a Christian, or whatever you are, talk to your God around you and say, I have this issue. I have this, right? And don't try to analyze why. And I remember much later on, somebody was talking, and it was actually a meditation group leader, and she was talking, and she said, in the middle of a sentence, she just, as a group of words, but you know how some things just jump out at you? That you go, oh, right? And she was saying about life and blah, blah, blah. And she says, because you deserve to be happy and blah, 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 blah. And those words, you deserve to be happy, although they had no emphasis in her voice, just shouted out to me. And what came into my awareness was, I didn't believe that I deserved to be happy, which is why I didn't believe I deserved to live. And most of it came from my abusive childhood and all the things I told myself. I am not good enough. I don't deserve. I have no confidence. I have this. I have not that. And all those kind of things, all that came up into my consciousness. And that's the awakening process that'll dissipate all this anger. And when you stop blaming other people around you, when you stop blaming externals, right? Stop blaming externals and start to see that what is triggering is just a trigger. If it wasn't that thing, if it wasn't somebody cutting you off in traffic, it would be somebody cutting you off in a lineup, or it'd be your pen not working, or it'll be something else. Something else will trigger that because your body wants you to hear. Your God wants you to hear, wants you to become awakened, wants you to transmute into all this light. Your God wants to be one with you. And then although we've cut this process off of being one with God, we are going through this process of becoming awakened. And this whole thing about anger and awareness and all that stuff is part of that process of becoming one, right? So allow yourself to become the silent observer of your mind, your life, right? And when something triggers your anger, realize it's a trigger. It is not that person. It is not the event. It's a trigger that's showing you there's anger or there's issues. And when you become aware that you're becoming angry, wow, you can pat yourself on the back because you have just moved to a whole new level of consciousness and you are on the journey to inner healing, to inner peace, to inner joy, to everything you've ever wanted, that contentment. So anyway, this is the process of learning to love yourself. It's not necessarily looking in the mirror and saying, oh yeah, I love you. Yes, I love you. No, I don't. No, I really do love you. I do. No, this is the process. This process of awakening, of becoming aware. This is all the process of learning how to love yourself, to accept yourself, to be who you are, and to be the most amazing person that you already are and just don't realize it. So anyway, thanks for tuning into this episode 48. My name is Will Sinclair. Sometimes I forget to say it. And you're listening to The Real Truth About You. You can go to therealtruthaboutyou.com and get more insights and more podcasts and some resources and even some juicy recipes that I put up there. And anyway, I have had a blast being with you. If you have enjoyed this episode and you think somebody else can benefit from it, can you point them in this direction? Can you share this podcast with them, number 48? And even if you have to download it and send it to them or put it on a CD or, tell them where the iTunes link is or whatever, Google Play, whatever you're on. If you can share this podcast and get the message to somebody else, that would be absolutely fantabulous. So anyway, this is Will Sinclair, and you've been listening to The Real Truth About You. Go to therealtruthaboutyou.com, and you can also email me at support@therealtruthaboutyou.com. And anyway, have yourself an awesome week until our next podcast. And I just want to let you know that you are loved. You are loved, you are loved, and you absolutely rock.